Let's learn how to read the Bible today, shall we? Proverbs chapter 4, starting in verse 9. I hope that by the end of this, you'll know how to read the Bible better. You'll have some of those essential Bible study skills more refined and developed. Maybe you'll know what to look for. But if you didn't already know, before we jump into it, we have a free Bible study program, 40-day program, an 11-day program, a 27-day program. They're all free, and it's linked in the description below. You can check that out at abovereproachministry.com. Let's get to it. Today's study is Proverbs 4:9, talking about let me change my color here. She will place on your head a graceful garland. She will bestow on you a beautiful crown. So she's doing something. Well, if you watched the last Bible study walkthrough, which I can't assume everyone did, you would know that the she being described here is actually wisdom, right? So this is David talking to Solomon, or King Solomon is recalling when his father David would tell him this. And King David told Solomon, don't forsake wisdom, right? She actually will keep you. Love her, she'll guard you. The beginning of wisdom is this: get wisdom. And whatever you get insight. Prize her, she will exalt you. She will honor you if you embrace her. And then verse 9 is continuing all these ideas of what it is that wisdom will do and why you should pursue wisdom. So this is one long list, and what we've done is highlighted in blue all the different things that wisdom does, right? She will place on your head a beautiful garland. She will bestow on you a beautiful crown, okay? So something to ask is why is the head something that's brought out here? Why is the head something that's specified? Why not a necklace? Why not a robe? Why not a ring? Why not sandals? Why is the head here something that wisdom is beautifying and decorating, right? And I think if we continue reading, we'll actually figure that out. So what I want to do is circle what it is that's being put on the head, right? So when these weird, scriptures that you see in wisdom literature and poetry especially, you start to make sense of it when you ask questions. So it's okay to ask questions like, why is the head brought out? Why is there a graceful garland being put on the head? Why is wisdom putting a beautiful crown on the head of the person who loves wisdom? Another question to ask is, why is it called a graceful garland, a beautiful crown, right? And maybe even ask, why is wisdom placing and bestowing these things on the head of the one who actually treasures her, right? Well, I think this actually sums up everything that's been said up to this point. Wisdom keeps you, guards you, right? Wisdom exalts and honors you. And what that looks like in a symbolic way, right? This is symbolic imagery. Here's an image to give you an idea of what it spiritually looks like for wisdom to dress you up. It's like wisdom is taking a graceful garland and covering your head with it. It's like she's taking a beautiful crown and bestowing that upon your head. As if to what? As if to honor and exalt you. In other words, when you read the Bible and you come across weird images and metaphors and imagery like this, it's helpful to take that specific metaphor or image and go, how does this relate to everything that was just said before it? Right? So we get to figure that out. Well, I think the exalting and the honoring are represented here by a crown and a garland being put on the head of the individual, like they're being, crowned and, honored. That's the word I was looking for. They're being honored. What better image to represent someone being honored than a crown being put on their head? Well, why is it graceful? I don't know. We can go figure that out, though. Why is it beautiful? Well, I think because wisdom dressing you up is always going to look beautiful. Wisdom, in other words, what wisdom decorates you with and bestows upon you and places on your life and honors you with, it's beautiful. People recognize the wisdom in your life as if it's a beautiful crown being bestowed on you and honor being put on you. If you read the beginning of Proverbs, so here's what I'll say. One of the things that's helpful when you read the Bible is to think about everything that's been said before this verse up to this point. And we've read 3 full chapters of Proverbs, okay? So not everyone would know this. But we've already seen in Proverbs how with wisdom comes not just honor, but riches, a kind of godly influence. And what Solomon gets is honor, wealth, fame, a great name. Well, wisdom wants to add that to you the appropriate way, in the appropriate amount, at the appropriate time, in a way that's beautiful, and people recognize around you, wow, that wisdom we see you walking in, the wisdom you're applying to your life, we can see it as if it's a beautiful crown on your head. But also, wisdom here is putting something on your life that people recognize. Not just the wisdom you walk in where they're like, wow, you're wise, but what comes with that, the honor and the exaltation. Like, wow, you've fill in the blank, however wisdom wants to flesh that out. So I think this is a summary statement of what's been said prior to this. The reason I think that is because if you notice here in blue, there's those quotation marks that end David talking to Solomon, which tells me now in verse 10, Solomon is back to speaking. This is no longer King David talking to his son. Now Solomon's taking the reins and going, so hear my son and accept my words, so that the years of your life may be many. Here's why you should, as the listener, as the reader, as the son, here's why you should accept the words and hear what Solomon is saying in his wise words. Because the years of your life will be many. Whatever that looks like, whatever that means, to whatever degree God decides, wisdom here is adding to your life. The years of your life here are made to be many. Whatever that many is, in other words, the most abundant and fullest life, not just in length, but in quality, right? That full life is found by hearing and accepting the wise words Solomon is giving. In other words, very simply, hear and accept wisdom. Because wisdom will add to your life the appropriate amount in duration and quality, right? Wisdom leads you into that, okay? So something to ask is, how does verse 10 connect to verse 9? That's something we should ask. When Solomon kind of pauses and goes, hey, enough about my little story. You need to hear what I'm saying and accept my words, so that the years of your life may be many. I think the idea is this. He's described what King David told him wisdom would do, right? And Solomon is actually experiencing that. His life becomes a testimony, almost like my life proves that this works, right? So then that reinforces, back to Solomon telling his son, be wise, it reinforces what he's saying. It's one thing to say you'll live long. It's another thing to say, my daddy told me the same thing, and wisdom indeed bestows and places a crown of life and honor on your head. I've seen it. In other words, Solomon here is speaking from experience, and that's sometimes the greatest motivator, right? He goes, I've taught you the way of wisdom. I've led you in the paths of uprightness. Interesting. So now we have some insight into Solomon's relationship with his son, okay? And here's what Solomon has done. I want you to note this, okay? There are 2 things that Solomon does. He says, I've taught you and I've led you. Well, what have you taught him? Well, I've taught him the way of wisdom, and I've led him in the paths of uprightness. So far, in the life of the son, his father has taught him wisdom. So he knows what wisdom is. His father's led him in the paths of uprightness, right? The way of wisdom and the paths of uprightness. These are 2 different things Solomon has given or brought to his son, right? One is a way, one is a path. I think they're the same thing. the way or the path that you walk on, right? Solomon has led his son in the way and the path of wisdom. So it's interesting that uprightness here is actually related to wisdom, right? Now, again, you wouldn't know this unless you read the first chapter. That's why reading in context is so important. But in the first chapter, we saw that wisdom, one of the qualities of real wisdom, is uprightness or integrity. And Solomon's going, I've taught you this. I've led you in this. Now accept what I'm saying. Hear me, right? Because up to this point, the son has kind of been, just brought up by his father to do this. But now the son is reaching a point in his life where he has the choice. Will he hear and accept? Will he actually receive what he's been taught and been led in and demonstrated by his father? Or will he not? Now he's going to describe what happens when the son chooses to walk in this wisdom. He says, when you walk. Okay? Pay attention to the word when. It's a qualifying word. It lets you know, when something's going to happen, or a condition for a promise or a statement. It says, when you walk, your step will not be hampered. If, another one of those conditional words, if you run, you will not stumble. So there are two things promised, and we'll end on this verse. The word and lets me know there are two things. Just like Solomon here is doing two things, which are essentially the same, like one thing explained two different ways. Well, there are two things, two ways that the son will experience life. Two, ways to explain his life experience. But look at the when and the if. When you walk. Now, in the previous verse, do I see any words that relate to walking? Right? Because he doesn't just mean when you walk in a general sense. There has to be a way to walk. Meaning, if you read it like this, it would be wrong. When you walk however you want, your step won't be hampered, and if you run however you want, you won't stumble. There's actually a condition. There's a kind of walking in mind. Okay? And if I don't know what the kind of walking is, I might walk away from this text and go, hey, I can live however I want and claim this promise for myself. Actually, there's a condition. Remember, if you run, you will not stumble. But that's conditioned upon, I'm going to draw arrows to the conditions, if you can see it. It's conditioned upon you walking in the paths of uprightness, walking in the way of wisdom, and then, just like we saw previously, let me show you how this idea has already been put forth, where wisdom keeps and guards you when you don't forsake her. Same idea here. When you walk in the way of wisdom and walk in the paths of uprightness, when you walk, your step will not be hampered. Wisdom here is making sure that your steps are not hampered. Wisdom here is making sure that when you run, you will not stumble. So here's the point. Everyone is running and walking a kind of lifestyle. If it's not on the way or the path of uprightness and wisdom, don't expect this promise because it's conditioned upon the previous statement, right? This, verse 12, is connected to verse 11. And if you don't know what he said before this, you might take this promise for yourself when you don't meet the conditions for it. Okay? And one of the ways I make sense of, well, what is the kind of walking? Or is it really walking on the way and then wisdom will make sure you do this? One of the way I make sense of that is, have I seen that idea already? Wisdom keeping your steps from being hampered. Wisdom from keeping you from stumbling. And the answer is, if I read a little before this, I do indeed. Wisdom is here guarding and keeping the person who doesn't forsake her. All right? So I hope that something stuck out to you, you noticed something, or something's clearer based on this Bible study walkthrough, my job is just to teach you how to read the Bible as best as I can. So I'm trying to show you what to pay attention to and to look out for, qualifying words, the ifs, the whens, repeating ideas. When something is said 2 different times, or maybe a character is doing 2 different things, right? Or 2 actions, are they similar? Well, Solomon teaching and leading seems to be the same thing, right? Or the son walking and running here seem to be the same thing. It's walking a way of life. It's walking on the way or a path that is either light or darkness. So, life or death. I hope this was helpful. I'll see you guys in the next Bible study walkthrough. Make sure you check out the free Bible study, 40-day Bible study program we have linked in the description below if you really want to take your Bible study deeper and learn how to read the Bible. And I'll see you guys later.